Good evening. Welcome everybody. We get to have a soundtrack tonight because we have a sound system here. If I get too boring, you can entertain yourselves with that noise.
Does this music mean anything?
Yes, it means everything. I call what I present the yoga of radiant presence, which is obviously just made up hot air, but it's actually a fairly precise term, and so I can talk a little bit about why I call it that, because it actually conveys a lot about what the point of it is. I call it a yoga. Yoga implies that it's an action or a process or some means of engagement that does something or that goes somewhere. And it's the yoga of radiant presence. So it is concerned with radiant presence. And of course, as a word, is a kind of a complex, it's a kind of a nebulous word. It's a very chameleonish word. It can mean a lot of different things. And in one sense, the yoga of radiant presence is about radiant presence because radiant presence is the object of the yoga. But it's also the yoga of radiant presence because it turns out it's the radiant presence itself which is doing the yoga. So the entire trick of yoga of radiant presence is to discover the actuality of radiant presence, i.e. the actuality of what this is, this actuality that constitutes the field of your experience. And you'll discover this actuality is not just an object, it's not just a subject, it's not just passive, it's not just active. On the contrary, it encompasses all modes of what we usually think of as agents and agency and object and so on in itself. So when you look at what you are experiencing, you discover it is a miraculously present, experiential characteristics that present as an absolutely dynamic, absolutely intelligent, energy, call it. And if you look at what's experiencing your experience, lo and behold, you find the same thing. It's a miraculously present, inconceivably intelligent, absolutely dynamic energy. And lo and behold, the two energies are not two, they're one and the same. So what is actually seeing your experience or what's being experienced are one and the same thing. And this is, of course, readily discoverable just by looking at your experience itself and looking for yourself, what is there? What is present as experience? What is this that is here? What is this that is here as experiencer? And of course, we have our stereotypes. We imagine ourselves as some little, viewing capacity at some point inside our heads, and we imagine the world as this vast panorama of all of this objective stuff, which is kind of sitting there or doing its own thing, independent of you. But if you look, just precisely at the actuality of your moment-to-moment experience, you discover that what is present as experiencing. And what is doing the experiencing is present as experiencing. It's one and the same. There's only one thing here, and it appears as object, it appears as subject, it appears as doer, it appears as done, it appears as others, it appears as self, it appears as all of the different subcategories that we usually imagine and divide our experience into, philosophically in our imagination when we're sort of formulating a worldview as to what's going on here. So, and what is it that this is doing? Okay, let's say that this is intrinsically an action. It's intrinsically, in some sense, a process. It's intrinsically, in some sense, doing something or doing itself or what have you. All this dynamism, all this intelligence, all this profound inherent meaningfulness that is just embodied in this actuality that is here, this field of experience. And of course you can't answer that question because it's completely transcendental, it's completely mysterious, miraculous. But it's probably not completely untrue to say it's exploring itself. It's moving into itself. It's integrating with itself. It is unfolding into itself perpetually, eternally, without end. And of course, we experience this as what we think of as our maturity, or and if you think of it in spiritual terms, we may think of it as our development of more and more subtlety, more and more intelligence of being with our being with our experience, and all these sorts of things. So this is already doing nothing but exploring itself, experiencing itself, unfolding into itself. It's like water flowing into water, oil flowing into oil eternally. And this is what this actually is. I mean, you can't say that defines it. You can't say that it is that. But it's not untrue to see it in those terms. So, calling this radiant presence is meaningful in the sense that it is clearly present. Presence is one of its most obvious characteristics. Any and all aspects of what this is present. Perceiving potency is present. Perceived is present. Experience is present. All of this vast spectrum of experiential characteristics is present. And so there is this undeniable actuality, this undeniable presence, this undeniable reality that is here. You can't wrap your head around it, but it's completely obvious that is the case, whatever it is, right? And I call it radiant because this presence is intrinsically dynamic. It is incredibly creative. It never is static. It never sits still. It's never inert. It's pulsing with dynamism, with transience, with change, with development, which we experience as, of course, obviously, the flow of time, the dynamism of thought, all of the unstoppable dynamism that shows up as the nature of all of these characteristics within our experience, and as experience itself. So this is radiant presence. It is present. It is intrinsically radiant. And this radiant presence is, and has always been, checking itself out. It's unfolding into itself. It's exploring itself. Your experience has always been never anything but that. Your experience has always been this unending exploration of life, of being, of reality, of experiential characteristics. So this is already happening. This exploration is already ongoing. But we complicate it in our imagination by interpreting it in all the normal ways as we interpret our being. We interpret our life as being, I'm in my body and I'm in my life and all this other stuff is out there. And so we have this very complex superstructure of philosophy and interpretation on it, and we may not see the incredible integral unfoldment and the incredible integral process that this intrinsically consists of. But nonetheless, even not seeing it, it still is that. It still is an exploration of itself. But when you come to see that is the case, when you come to notice quite clearly that the eternal unfoldment of this radiant presence, of your being, of what you are, of this transcendental miracle that is actually here, is what's happening. When you see that directly, when you see that clearly, then you can participate in this ongoing yoga, this ongoing unfoldment with ever-increasing intimacy, ever-increasing intelligence and precision and integration. And at that point, the entire process essentially gets much more efficient. It really can kind of take off. And, in various traditions call this enlightenment or realization or, going to the other shore or what have you. But the point is that this is an actuality, and seeing what this actually is, you get to participate in it with a level of much more profound intimacy, much more profound engagement on all levels multidimensionally. Because you already are. You are engaged with this field of actuality completely. Just the fact of it appearing is engagement. It's not like we need to do something with it. The fact that it shows up, the fact that, these colors are appearing in your field of vision, these things on the side of your field of vision, or these background sounds you're hearing, the fact that they're showing up means you are engaged with them. They're real. They're actuality. They're energetic, actual presences that your reality is engaging. And this engagement in itself is the yoga. Just the showing up, just the presence of experience is profoundly intelligent, profoundly integrative. As humans, we're used to thinking we have to do something about it or figure something out or think something or, what do I do with this stuff? And it turns out you don't have to do anything with it. It's already doing itself, but from a human point of view, we discount it. We think, well, it's just here, but now what? Let me do something with it. But in actuality, the amazing thing is just the presence, just the actual presence of all of this transcendental reality is an inconceivable process. It's doing itself on the most subtle, inherent level with absolute, inconceivable transcendental intelligence and meaningfulness. And all of your experience has never been anything other than that. And this is not something to aspire to or something to look at as a philosophy. You look for yourself and check out your experience and see what it is. Find out what it is. And what this is self-verifyingly itself. And you can see it there's no limit to how clearly you can see it. And as you see it with ever-increasing clarity, you consciously participate in it in its own level with ever-increasing intimacy. And this is what I call the yoga of radiant presence. So it's not something you need to do so much as something you need to discover that you are, and that is ongoingly and eternally doing itself. But even though that's the case, even though it is doing itself, this discovering that it is, this engaging with it nakedly and more profoundly and with greater clarity, sort of shifts it into overdrive. It's amazing how this happens, and there's no way to try and make sense of it or say why that should be so. But experientially, you can discover that this is the case. So that's the yoga of radiant presence.
So we automatically have skin in the game.
Yeah, absolutely. It's already a done deal. It's just a matter of waking up to the fact that that is the case, and not over-interpreting and over-analyzing it with all these incredibly baroque and essentially imaginary delusions of normal human interpretations of normal human worldviews of what you are and what your life is and what's going on.
So one pattern is that there's a pure state. So a sound or light can come in, and there's no reaction. But as you progressively hear the same sound or see that same color, some reaction starts to pop up, as being good or bad.
No, but reaction isn't actually reaction. Reaction is just more radiance. Reaction is its own phenomenon. We're used to thinking of, like say you hear a noise and you start thinking about what the noise might be. So you might say the thinking about it is a reaction to the noise, but that's not the case. It's just a co-emergent energy, because the thought is energy that's appearing miraculously. The sound is energy that appears miraculously. And the fact that there seems to be some kind of sequence or some kind of interrelationship is just arbitrary.
So there's no need to try to isolate that state, which is not reacting.
No, because there's only one state. And a non-reactive state is, a so-called non-reactive state is not superior to a so-called reactive state. The trick is not that one state's better than another. The trick is to see what every state actually is. And every state turns out to be the same thing. It always looks different. It can look radically different. I mean, you can be really agitated and torqued up and pissed off and everything, or you can be just, relaxed and happy or asleep or in a coma or something. It can look really, really different, but it's always the same thing. It can look like the waking state and being really invested in things. It can look like being asleep and just, basically nothing, but just, nothing coherent. It can look like being in a dream. And it's actually the same state. It can look like anything. The range of the way it can appear is inconceivably broad, but it's always the same thing. It's always radiant presence.
One seems to be one state seems to have forgotten itself. It's lost when you're in the storytelling.
Right.
Whereas another state can be more of an observer.
Maybe so. But that's irrelevant, because in actuality you're always the observing faculty is always completely on, and the observed is always completely present. And that's the case whether you're distracted and deluded or whether you're in clarity and peace and detachment. It doesn't matter. There's no hierarchy of states. There's no better way to be functioning. And that's just an endless fallacy. That's a red herring that just gets us sucked into endless investment and endless torturing ourselves. The trick is to see what it is, not to try to control it or manipulate it into some kind of imaginary superior condition, like detachment or witnessing or peace or something like this. I mean, detachment can happen. What looks like detachment can happen. What looks like peace can happen. What looks like investment can happen. And all these things happen chaotically. But it's not important to play a game of playing one off against each other. The point is to see what they all have in common, what's always the same. And what's always the same is you are always here. You can't say what that means, you can't define it, but it's undeniable and obvious. And this here-ness is absolutely spontaneous. It's absolutely inherent. It's doing itself, right? You're not being here. You're not needing to do your being here. It is. You just are. You can't. It's unstoppable. It's miraculous. And your presence equals the presence of your experience, equals the inclusion of all of the vast panorama of characteristics that may happen to be showing up at the moment, which are completely unpredictable and never repeat, and has an infinite range of what it can seem like, as we've been talking about. But it's always actually the same thing. And this is the powerful discovery.
You need sensitivity.
Yeah, but you have sensitivity. You are hyper-intelligent. You are hypersensitive. How could you be experiencing all this incredible nuance and precision of what shows up, of all these characteristics that show up in your experience, if you didn't have sensitivity? You're pure sensitivity. You're made of it. You're pure intelligence. You're made of it. But it's not a human sensitivity. It's not a personal sensitivity or personal intelligence necessarily. It's inherent intelligence. It's inherent sensitivity. And that's the important sensitivity. That's the important intelligence, because it is supremely functional. And it's that intelligence that's doing this whole amazing process here that I'm calling a yoga. Well, we just call it life. Yeah.
So, along the same lines, I noticed it a few weeks ago. I think it's sort of resolving. I started having this trouble going to sleep because I was kind of I don't know what's going on, but it was kind of like I was being more aware of a state change, or of, because you use the metaphor of dreaming a lot when you're talking.
Sure.
So all of a sudden I was like, how do you go from like what I think of as consensus reality to sleeping? Like, is that like, and I start feeling like unsafe to make that transition.
Yeah.
And I've had trouble throughout my life falling asleep, but I never quite labeled it as. There's something about just releasing into that. There's some kind of a shift that's going on.
Yeah.
But obviously, my body knows how to do it, right? It's like I was trying to control it.
Yeah, sure. And this is very common with our ego structures and our whole normal waking state orientation. There's a subliminal clinging to that. There's a subliminal holding that as valuable or important, and also holding it as safe somehow. And so anything that threatens that, or that feels like letting go of that, or like challenging that, or pulling that away, can awaken a kind of a knee-jerk sort of a, wait a minute, wait, hold the phone, you know.
Right. It was
This
kind of
is
interesting
threatening.
because it was like all of a sudden I was kind of noticing something that I've never noticed, and yet obviously I've done it all my 60 some years.
Yeah.
So.
But no, again, that's okay. If there's a kind of a subtle clinging or a subtle security
Right.
orienting to waking state, ego structures and stuff, just observe that as an energy phenomenon. I mean, how does that happen? What's doing that? I mean, that's astounding. I mean, how can that happen? God, the consciousness is so clever that it can just spin these spider webs effortlessly and spontaneously. It improvises them. It's not like it sits down and plans and scratches its head and makes a map of what it's going to do. Yeah.
It's doing that all the time anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, it's real easy to think of. It's real easy to again, to get in a value judgment of, the waking state and ego structure is the enemy. It's an inferior condition, or all of this orienting and worldviews is interpreting as an inferior condition. It's not. It doesn't matter at all. It is itself transcendental radiance.
Right.
I mean, you didn't do it. It's just here, right? How's it here? It's here spontaneously. It just grew up like an oak tree grows out of the acorn.
Right.
The acorn didn't do the oak tree. It's just there. It's part of this miracle. And all of our neuroses and human functioning and human, belittling ourselves, unbeknownst to ourselves, unintentionally, belittling ourselves by all this partial identification with ego states and all that, is part and parcel of the miracle.
Right.
You don't need to stop it or fix it. You just notice it. Notice that there's that energy too.
Well, there was part of me that was going, this is kind of cool that I'm even noticing this, because once I've done it all my life, I never really thought that it was a big deal to shift from one state of consciousness to another, and now it's like I'm noticing there is this shift, and I don't know, I don't know, it's just kind of,
well, directing attention is subtly powerful, and just the action of directing attention can really shift things around. So, I mean, you go to sleep. You've always gone to sleep. It's something you do.
I mean, I didn't stay there. You don't have to go to sleep.
But you're looking at it in a new way now. You're looking at it in a different context. And there's something about that attention, about that looking, that is kind of, jostling things up a bit.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it felt like a good thing, but it was kind of disturbing for a couple of weeks there, where it was like, how do I go to sleep? I know how to go to sleep. And not just like take a sleeping pill so that I don't have to deal with it.
Yeah, right. Well, there's always that too.
Some days you have to do that.
Yeah, a lot of my sort of like that spiritual work or noticing always occurs. Well, a really easy one, almost daily, is waking up.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Or going. There is sort of a transition between waking up.
Yeah.
And
the state changes are really a prime territory for noticing, because it's so obvious. It's so obviously weird what's going on there. And how do you go from the amorphous lack of orientation and sleep to all of a sudden, the waking reality begins to coalesce, and instantly your worldview and your sense of yourself and your memory of what happened yesterday and all these things just sort of appear and just sort of seem to ossify like a building around you, How does that happen?
And lately a lot of it's been happening during sleep. I mean, it's almost like I'm not sleeping anymore. I mean,
well, you'll notice this. As unfoldment proceeds, you become aware of that. You're always present. You're always actually conscious.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a waking state consciousness.
No.
But it's a consciousness that is you, and you become more and more awake to it.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. I mean, it's really. it's really hard for me to differentiate between quote unquote my imagination, but imagination's cool, I think, it's fine. You know, but whether I'm sort of imagining this later when I'm, you know, woke up, or did it really happen? And you know, and I've really been trying hard, and it is really happening. I mean, it has to be happening, you know, now, or when I'm sleeping, I guess. But it's just sort of hard to even go, even to describe in words what that's like.
Well, it's impossible, not just hard. You know, what this phenomena, what's happening here, is so inconceivably multidimensional. It's not like it's just doing this or just doing that, or there's, you know, it has X, Y, and Z components. It's fractal and infinite and multidimensional, and it's intrinsically paradoxical in every way. So it's dizzying, it's mind-boggling, and you know, the parts of it that we access consciously or figure out or we notice, you know, wow, my God, the personality is so weird. You know, how's that happen? Waking state's so weird. How is waking up? I mean, all these kinds of considerations. There's this consciousness seeing everything. How's that happen? What's up with that? But these questions are not answerable because what you're looking at, what this is so intrinsically multidimensional. You can never get to the bottom of it. You can never find it or get a hold of it or draw a circle around it or say what it is. But you don't need to. You just need to feel it. Feel the radiant presence, and it shows you what it is, in its multidimensionality. Not as a finality, but as and call it an eternality. It's the eternal, unstoppable, comprehensive condition. And it's directly knowable. It's knowable with absolute self-verifying intimacy. And, you know, the way to come to know it is to have no pre-expectations about it and feel it. Experience is by feeling. You know, remember, experience is by feeling. Everything, when you experience something, you're actually feeling it. When you're experiencing light and vision, you're actually feeling the light. When you experience thought, you're actually feeling the thought. When you're experiencing all of these, you're feeling, energy is felt. It's most intimately engaged with. It's felt by consciousness. I mean, it's a very, you know, it's incredibly subtle, tingling, you know, I mean, obviously trying to say what it is or talk about it is absurd. But, you know, this absolute intimacy of engagement with the presence of energy, with the radiant presence. And all of experience, any portion of it, and experience as a totality, is nothing other than this absolute intimate engagement, this feeling. And just letting yourself notice that, letting yourself feel this thing that you are feeling, let yourself notice that that's the case, and, you know, the floodgates are open. Just that feeling, it will show you what it is, completely irrationally, completely, you know, illogically, but self-verifyingly, and very, very powerfully. You know, it transforms just by engaging with it as it is. And of course it's very paradoxical because of course you already are engaged with it as it is. But letting yourself notice that that is the case lets you participate in the engagement sort of first generation, sort of without any recursive loops of craziness.
Which is the, I think, phenomena you talk about, which is tendency to label
Yeah.
and oversimplify.
Yeah.
Let's call red, as opposed to diving into it.
Yeah, and because when that happens, it's not even that that's a problem, because the consciousness, the mentality spontaneously does this. But when it does it, you notice that it hasn't actually limited anything. When you say that's red, you can call it red, but it still is what it is. And what it is when you just feel it directly and irrationally, what it is amazing. You can't say what it is, even when you're busy saying it's red. So labeling doesn't, even though it seduces into a virtual limitation, it doesn't create any actual limitation. Right? Experience is always completely open and multidimensional, even when you're arrogantly telling think you know what everything is. I mean, that's the wonderful fact about this yoga, is you're already doing it. You already know how, you don't have to learn how to do it. You're already doing it. You just need to let yourself notice that you are, notice that it is the case, which just means notice what experience intrinsically is. You know, this amazing presence of this astounding characteristics of this amazing consciousness, and none of it makes any sense, and it's all completely miraculous and absurd. But wow, I mean, it's just major wow factor. And it is that. You know, I mean, it is that intrinsically, and it shows you that it is that, and in that showing, you discover you are that, and the whole thing just snowballs infinitely. You're gone. You know, it's so funny because, you know, it's what our experience has always been, and all of this, you know, all of this spiritual philosophies and complexities and needing to do this and trying to fix that and aspiring to the other, you know, is just such a red herring. You know, it's simply a matter of getting out of your own way and notice what you already are without doing anything. You don't have to do fuck all. It just is what it is, and what it happens to be is so astounding and amazing, and that fact is its own, you know, is its own process. That fact is its own magic carpet, and you're off and running.
Takes away a lot of second guessing.
Oh yeah,
I mean, that's what I've noticed.
yeah. Because things, what things are is self-verifying, and even, you know, when you depart from that and get lost in your trips and all this stuff, you still haven't left anything. You haven't lost anything. You haven't departed from anything. Yeah. I mean, this just continually, spontaneously, it deepens itself and it verifies itself, and it, you know,
But doesn't the orientation change?
yeah, the orientation seems to change drastically, but of course it doesn't actually change. You just discover that what you thought it's so you discover it's vastly different than you thought it was. It's not that it has changed; it's that your ignorance, your ignorant diminishing of it, becomes more and more absurd. You know, and that, you know, the mind is so, I mean, of course, as we all know, the mind is so subtle and so tricky, and, you know, psychological states and the way things seem to be, and these sort of subliminal, unconscious, interpretive frameworks and all this stuff. The mind just spins these things out, you know, for fun, seemingly, unendingly, right? And of course, we're in that. We experience these amazing contexts, and so it, you know, all these different flavors of confusion and interpretation, and maybe it's this and maybe it's that and maybe I'm this, and, you know, feeling small or feeling grandiose or feeling like nothing at all, or, you know, I mean, all these things are they just occur spontaneously. None of them are true. There's no true perspective. You know, the true perspective is that there's no perspective, which is really weird. Because what does no perspective mean? You know, but and you can't say what it means. But you don't need to. You don't need to find that, because all of these, this unendingly spits out all these perspectives as part of its process, without ever actually being limited to them or limited by them. So the mind and psychology, and even delusion, is in fact no problem at all, because it's all just this amazing. It's all part of the same magic show. It's all of that is actually the evidence of this very same miraculous process that, you know, that is worth noticing, that you actually are. So there's no villain of the piece.
Except the ones you make up.
Yeah, well, you're free to make up as many villains as you want.
So is intention also a energy pattern that you just kind of make up?
Of course.
That has no impact? And,
Of course. Well, you can't say whether or not it has impact. You can't say whether or not anything has impact because everything is inconceivably interconnected in nonlinear ways that we can't sort out. But intention itself is a partiality. There's nothing but intention in one sense. Intention is objectively intention is the fact of this being what it is. But psychologically, all sorts of intention and personal intentions and aspirations and will and sort of functional engagement. When you're doing something and you're focusing your attention. All these things could be said to be aspects of or partial instances of degrees or qualities of intention. So it's something. Who knows? It's just it's an aspect. But again, it's just intention itself or any functional quality whatsoever is just a partial indication of the nature of this. That this can do that. Yeah, this can look like intention. And any intention is being done, this is doing it. But when it's doing it, you can't say what's being done because it's not simply anything. It's not simply intention. Intention isn't limited to actually being intention because it's, of course, multidimensional and irrational and miraculous, so all bets are off as to what it actually is.
So when you're going through your life and you're caught up with your plan or your intent or whatever,
Sure.
Okay, so that's just like going on.
Yeah.
Life is doing whatever it's doing,
Yeah.
and this is just kind of something our mind or ego grabs hold of when we think we're actually making something happen or getting work done.
Yeah, but that's a small subsystem. In terms of the actuality of experience, all of that's a relatively small subsystem. We may feel like it's huge and we may feel like we're absorbed in it, but in actuality,
there's all this other stuff going on at the same
yeah,
time.
and it's actually, even though we're downplaying it or in denial of it or censoring it somehow from noticing it, it's actually there just as much as the stuff we think we're, focusing on. That's one of the simplest tricks of this yoga to notice. And noticing is whatever is going on, whatever you're obsessed with or whatever you're engaged with experientially, just notice it's something else.
Right.
Just step to say, what about over there? And then something else from there, and then something else from there. And there's no limit to the something else's.
Right.
And when you follow that out, when you do the math, when you see that actuality, you discover any obsession or any obsessive worldview or any obsessive self-identity is actually very small. It experiences fast. So you never can be stuck, even if some horrible entrenched investment neuroses is going on. You're not actually stuck in it. It's just sort of happening over here, and you're there, but you're also everywhere else, and that's not happening there.
And when you think you're getting things done,
Yeah.
that's just your functionality taking over to a certain extent, right? A lot of times.
But when you get it's
like
a
when
very
I go to work and I see my
it's a
kids.
very heavy-handed misinterpretation. It's way over interpreting. So here we are. I'm getting a lot done by here. I'm talking, right? But I'm breathing, and I'm shining the light, and I'm making the music happen, and I'm being gravity and holding everyone's butts to the chair, and so. Yeah, this activity is happening, but all the other activities are also happening, and they are, what's doing them is actually what's doing, like in this case, the talking, or anything else. Or if you're, I'm driving my car, I'm going to work, and I'm going to do my job, it's all spin doctrine, because those things happen, but everything else is simultaneously happening. It's not those things, and if you look very closely, you're not doing the one any more than the other. It's all just happening. And then the mind says, oh, I'm doing this. The mind always spin doctors itself into self-importance or into doership or into... I believe Ramana Maharshi said at several occasions that, the essence of non-realization, the essence of delusion is the idea of doership. the idea of personal doership, which is just a concept. Yeah. If you look at the way anything appears in experience, it all appears the same way. Just miraculous proof it's there. You know, a thought appears, it's proof it's there. A desire to go do something appears, proof it's there. You didn't do it. You know, you may feel like, oh, I'm doing this. I'm running out of chai. I need to get more chai. I'm getting more chai. But the urge to do that just appeared. I didn't do the doing of doing the chai. You know, it's all just it's all kind of spin doctoring of self-importance by labeling, oh, I'm doing this. You know.
It's the identification.
Yeah, but it's a conceptual identification. It's an identification of definition. I'm defining it as being something that I am doing, and I'm being very nebulous as to exactly what I mean by I, and exactly how precisely I'm doing it.
Well, Peter, I mean, but in one sense, I mean, in a really huge sense, the big I.
Sure.
Experiencing I.
Yes.
That's
the
I
point.
mean, that's doing everything.
Yeah, that's the point. That's why
Personal I.
That's why discovering the radiance is so important, because when you discover the radiance, you see the radiance is shining, the radiance is radiant, the radiant is dynamic. The energy of reality is intrinsically dynamic because it is that. And that is everything, and that's doing everything, and that's what you are.
Yeah.
So the big I is the radiance, the will of God, the Big Bang, what have you.
Everything is in me. I mean, or is me. It's in me, is me.
Yeah.
There's
You
no
are
word to describe
an
it.
infinite
But
field.
I've experienced that sometimes. That it's, it is.
You-
That's radiant.
You are an infinite field of hyperdimensional, hyper-intelligent, hyper-consciousness. You're nothing more than that and nothing less than that.
Right.
And that's what this is. And you can notice that that's the case, and the implications of what it feels like and what seems to be going on is very different in that context.
At that point, you're just spinning off into infinity in a way. I mean, there's
Exactly.
no way, because
And
it
here,
never stops.
and here we are spinning off into infinity.
Yeah.
That's the only game in town.
Yeah, I mean, because it never stops.
Yeah. I mean, infinity opening to infinity is what we got here.
I think that's why people like space movies. I haven't seen that movie Gravity yet, but I'm saving it for a special time because I have a feeling it's going to have a sense of that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, just, lie on your back and look up at the night sky. I mean, everyone's done that at some point. And some people are connoisseurs and other people do it once, they've done it once in their life or whatever, but I mean, you get it right away. It's really palpable. It's completely obvious. Like, wow.
Right.
Just fucking wow.
Well, it's also because you're sort of, it disembodies you, in a way.
Well, it reveals that you are disembodied. It reveals that this is a field.
Yeah.
I think the trick, the big takeaway is paying attention to these wows that are happening all the time.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah. It's letting yourself notice that there's something more. There's something outside the normalcy and outside the dullness and outside the horror of our pathetic lives,
And then the more you do that, the more self-fulfilling it becomes.
Yeah.
So the wider view.
Yeah. The more you do it, the more sensitive. Yeah.
Minuscule.
Yeah, that's it, exactly.
The
more you do it, the more sensitive you become to it, and so you can do it more easily, and the more easily you can do it, I mean, it just snowballs on itself.
But ever since, we talked yesterday, I was like, walking out today and I was seeing all the leaves flying around.
Yeah. Yeah, wow.
Wow.
Yeah, wow.
But then you don't want to kind of cling on to it.
No.
And say, I'm going to keep doing that all the time. But
Don't try and deify it. Don't try and ossify it or turn it into something.
Right.
Because the very wowness of it is its ungraspability, is its ghostliness, or its, I don't know, there's probably a good word for it, evanescence or what have you. Well, I like the word. It's transcendental nature.
Unresolvability.
Yes, it's intrinsically unresolved, and that's why it's wow. You know, you're looking at infinity. You're looking at just woo, and that's what this is. I mean, you're actually seeing what this is, what you are when you see that.
Right, because the wow experience is something that you're having.
Sure. Yeah, you're having it, but there's no you. There's just having.
You're just having
All experience. You're having it as much as you're having all of your experience.
You're one and the same thing.
Yeah, it's presence. This here is a field of presence. Your experience is a field of presence. And we're used to thinking, oh, I'm experiencing it. But if you go look for an experiencer, you don't find anything. If you try and pin down exactly, precisely what's being experienced, you can't find it. It's infinite. It's weird. It's evanescent. So there's undeniably and actually and obviously experiencing, but there's no experiencer and there's no experienced. You know, and that's actually quite clear and quite obvious once you see it.
Especially when you have a wow experience.
Well, yeah, exactly, because you're outside of the context of your normal frame of reference.
Yeah, it's funny that the unresolvability is the same thing that in common mode we are trying to resolve. We're always trying that whole impulse is to close that down.
Yeah. The fantasy that you can get a handle on things. The fantasy that you can close the door.
Yeah. Somehow it's as simple as really it's just being learning to be comfortable that it's unresolved.
Yeah. It's developing a more sophisticated palate. It's like kids, you know, they taste something sweet and you give them asparagus and they go, "Pah," or whatever, right? But, you know, when you develop a sophisticated palate and when we're relatively immature spiritually, it's the same thing. When we're relatively less unfolded, we don't have a sophisticated palate. And our taste runs to closure. We want to know what things are. We want certainty. We want finality. We want to be able to get a hold of it. We want to, you know, have a definition. And as we develop a more sophisticated palate and learn to appreciate unresolvability, learn to appreciate openness and just, you know, weirdness and multidimensionality and infinity, you discover, lo and behold, it's delicious, it's yummy, it's scrumptious, it's infinitely entertaining, it's nourishing, it's delicious, it's profoundly meaningful, but not in a way you can get a hold of. So it's a whole different paradigm, it's a whole different, you know, mode of appreciation, you call it, or what have you.
I've also noticed that it's like trying to hold on to is so pointless because letting go isn't letting go of anything.
Yeah.
There's always more.
Yeah. Well, when you begin to when you get more mature and you see what it is, you discover that holding on is always just pretending to hold on because there's nothing to hold on to. You can't actually find anything to hold on to. It's creating. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I know what things are. You know, I can nail this down. I can put this in a box. But when you get more sophisticated to see what this is, you see, how could that happen? How could that even be done? You know, the genie is out of the bottle, never was in it.
To define comes from definis, to put an end to.
Yeah, exactly so. Exactly. And the very nature of every and any aspect of actuality, of actual experience, is that there's no edges, there's no ends. Everything is fuzzy, everything is fractal, everything is, you know, is mutually entwined with everything else in nonlinear and miraculous ways. Lily, could I ask a favor?
Of course, got to keep your motor running.
Gasoline.
Fueled by
Uh,
A
chai.
high test.
I'm running on sugar and caffeine.
Lead on it?
And cardamom.
And cardamom, yeah. Don't forget the cardamom, that's for damn sure.
Yeah,
I've often joked that I'm going to write a cardamom cookbook and it's going to have one page and on the page it's going to say, use more. So the cardamom recipe in the cardamom cookbook is use more.
In my case, almost came from my cardamom bread.
Nice.
It's a great snack. You ever did that? Just crack them and eat the seeds.
Oh yeah, you bet.
That's the direct. That's the direct.
Yeah, and if you have the powder, you can probably snort it too.
Wake you up.
Try that one.
I do that when I'm cooking.
That's like that asparagus on your little.
So I have a question, which has to do with when I get silent. There is a like a white noise in the background. And it's extremely peaceful.
Yeah.
To get in touch with it, and to even get in touch with it right now.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's the radiance. There's no stillness. I call the reality itself radiance or radiance because it's absolutely dynamic.
It's very dynamic.
There's no portion of it that's not. Yeah, there's no portion of it that's not moving. It's very, very, very. It can be very, very subtle. But it's everything. It's dynamic. I mean, a really nice meditation is just close your eyes and just look at the field of vision with the eyes closed, and there's just beautiful, gentle sparkles and dance and dynamism, and it forms patterns, and it's just. And you go to a background, there's just this very, very subtle little sparkle in development, or in sound, or in thought. Anywhere you look at experience, you find event, you find characteristics, you find action. It's completely alive, completely pulsating with life. Well, you study Kashmir Shaivism, Spadna. This is it's intrinsically dynamic, it's alive, it's active.
Same with thoughts.
Or
any dimension. Any dimension.
And exactly, it's all the same. They're just, all these different dimensions are just our heavy-handed classifications of something that is continuous and multidimensional infinitely. So we used to classify the five senses and mind and maybe whatever else you want to do, but it's completely arbitrary. If you look at experience, it's an absolute continuum of from sort of coarse to subtle, and just the range of characteristics is unending. And most of them are so subtle we don't even notice them because we're usually so attracted to our sensory experience, for example, when we're awake. But in actuality, they're all equally present. They're all equally noticeable. When you let yourself tune into it, so to speak.
And the locus of these dimensions is not precise.
Exactly. It indicates that there is no location. The location is manufactured. A sense of a center, a sense of here-ness is completely manufactured. Like when you're in deep sleep, where is here?
Yeah.
And then you start dreaming, and then you create a new here, and that here is where you are, and then the whole environment or whatever might seem to concretize around that here, and then the dream stops, and that here-ness is poof. So here-ness is just a side artifact of experience. Experience itself, experience in totality of experience is here. There's no here and there. It's here, 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 and it's you. It's presence. I mean, that's why I really like this phrase, radiant presence. It really, I mean, it's arbitrary and it's not actually true, but it's indicative in many ways of both the radiance, the dynamism, the intrinsic vitality of actuality, and the fact that it is here, it's present, it is actual, it is real. And anything that seems to be real, that seems to be occurring, is just piggybacking on the actuality of this. Right? So if you have a dream, the dream only seems to be real because your experience is real. Right? And the waking state seems to be real not because it's real, but because your experience is real. So the radiant presence is real, and then the waking state just piggybacks onto that and claims that the reality of your presence is its reality.
It's a house of cards.
Yeah, it is, it is.
I've been thinking today about the individuation and going beyond individuation
Mhm.
and the embodiment of individuation.
Mhm.
It does not indicate the size of the body, but to go from individuation to what is the word for it? There appears to be an individuation. It's
Yeah.
my universe, my
Right.
world.
Yeah.
Not yours, not mine.
Yeah.
And then something pops, that universe opens.
Yeah.
You know?
Because individuation is a partializing. Individuation always occurs in a context of something other than that. And individuation, let's say, notices itself, but it doesn't necessarily notice the otherness, except perhaps as a projection of otherness. But even when there seems to be embodiment, even when there seems to be individuation, that embodiment occurs in the context of the infinite field of everything.
Yeah.
And the individuation of...
Has no size.
Yeah, exactly. And there's no actual division between what seems embodied or what seems individuated and the field either. If you're trying to look, where's the edge, where's the border, where does it stop? It doesn't, it's all virtual. It's all just sort of like hypnosis. It's not actual. All you can find is the actual field of presence, and every portion of it is equally present, even if every portion of it looks different from every other portion of it experientially. I mean, that's one of the confounding things about this infinite field of presence, this infinite field of experiences. Every portion of it looks completely different than every other portion, and it's so easy to see. Look at your field of vision. I mean, anywhere, any sort of, say, pixel or point or direction or sort of, coordinates you fixate on looks exactly the way it looks, completely distinct from any other coordinate. And then some other coordinate looks completely different. Then you look at your vision and to your hearing, and that looks completely different. But then within your hearing, you hear this, you hear that, you hear this, and they're all completely different. They're all infinitely differentiated. Then you look at your sensation, and oh my God, I feel my butt on the chair. All this universe, this cascading waterfall of sensations, and you look at one portion of it, and it's completely different than every other portion. Exactly the way this point on my knee feels is different than the way that point on my other side of my knee feels, and different than the way my big toe feels, and different than the way my nose feels, and so anywhere you look, you have a field that's just infinitely differentiated, and yet it's a continuum. You close your eyes and you see this inconceivable event, little points of light, and everyone seems to be seemingly in a different location than all the others, and different intensity and different dynamism and different color, what have you, whatever it seems to be presenting as. This infinite differentiation within the field. And so it's a perfect Rorschach block to free associate any kind of interpretation you want on, right? So you want to free associate individuation or embodiment or a world or other people or any kind of plot line you want. You've got a lot of raw material to work with, You couldn't ask for a more complex Rorschach block.
Recently, to kind of entertain myself, sometimes I'll start like putting my focus on one of my feet, and then I'll notice how the rest of my body disappears.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and then it's like, what are the boundaries of my body?
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of like you take it for granted until you stop taking it for granted that you have a
Yeah.
boundary to your body, or you have a
Yeah.
size to your individuation, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But
When you
actually,
look-
it's all like you can't look at all of it at once.
Yeah.
By any-
All these things we take for granted, none of it adds up to examination. You can voyage through your experience. Experience is completely incoherent. It lacks coherence. You know, I mean, you go to you. The more you focus, it's an interesting artifact of awareness, or let's call it awareness. Why not? That awareness tends to a focus. Awareness tends to focus. It tends to focus on this or that and the other. And of course, we're very aware of this in the visual field. You're looking at something rather than something else. But in every aspect, you know, in the field of sound, you tend to hear. There's still the natural. It comes to focus around particular seeming phenomena, or in thought, the same thing, in emotion, the same thing, in sensation, the same thing. And this principle of focusing has an interesting property of whatever you happen to be focusing on, everything else gets very nebulous, gets very cloudy. And of course you can see this very obviously in the field of vision. You look at something and you can see it very sharply, and it's something, even while you're looking at something, you look even very, very close to it, and it's very sort of fuzzy. And the farther you get from your focus, the more fuzzy it gets until it's just practically not even there. And the same, you can find the same phenomena in any dimension of experience, in any sense field, any, you know, what have you. And focus is dynamic. It always dances around. So that there's only actually coherence in the point of focus. Everything else is progressively more and more incoherent. So the majority of the field of experience at any given instant is incoherent, and only whatever happens to be in focus has a seeming coherence. And of course that gets strange, because when we go into what you're actually focusing on and look very closely at it, you discover it doesn't have coherence either. It just has a kind of a virtual coherence, and you discover a sort of a fractal, you know, infinite, you know, too much information kind of a thing.
What is it that's happening when, let's say you're trying to listen to you, and they're playing Jayutal.
Sure.
So like my attention's going on Jayutal with you, and like there's in between that, it's like my irritation that I can't focus on what I want to focus on. That's just clinging or something like that. Okay.
Sure, it's another, you know, it's basically another energy phenomena appearing that we may think of as, oh, it's my nature or my programming or my whatever. But but interpreting it is silly, because it's just another miraculously present energy that is masquerading as being associated with being related to other energies, like in the case of my talking and the hearing and the distraction and the frustration.
Right.
But all of that is spin doctored into existence, because none of the elements of that narration actually exist as such. It's all just... And the attention dances around in it, and apparent reactions to the way the attention is dancing around appear, and the attention dances around on them. They aren't actually reactions, they're just more energy phenomena.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was trying to do with it, but it's like, oh, okay, whatever, I'll hear what I hear. And it's like there's this part of me that doesn't want to let go of, like, I'm trying to do this.
Well, sure, of course, you know, because we have a lifelong engagement with orienting to that mode, with our experience, and so, you know, it's a habit, you know, of doing it that way, and you know, the habit tends to be persistent. The horse finds its way back to the barn,
right?
Because it's done it a bazillion times.
Right. Yeah.
And it doesn't need to not do it. You know, again, the real point with all of this is not what you do or don't do, or to change what you do. Is to just see it, to see what it is, to basically see the radio present. see that it's all just miraculously appearing instantaneous, unanalyzable experiential energy phenomena. Yeah, I mean instantly, because you see that there's no, you can't hold on to it because it's so instantaneous, and you don't need to hold on to it because it never goes anywhere. It's always right here. And also in that context, it's kind of it's kind of interesting. It's kind of fun, and you learn a whole new aesthetic valuation of wow, this kind of openness and non-referentiality is kind of juicy. It's kind of yummy, you know.
Peter, so the field is always full, right?
The field is always full.
Always full.
Always full of itself.
And this is, you know, like the mansion with many rooms.
Yeah,
know?
infinite
So it
rooms.
occupies the novelty in this, which I want to kind of point out, because it's either the novelty is or is not recognized,
Mm-hmm.
and so it occupies itself fully, consciously.
Yeah.
That's the new sensation. That's the new embodiment, as it starts to embody itself consciously.
Yeah. I mean, continually and unendingly, and seemingly in different guises, very dynamically, but it's all virtual. Nothing actually happens. It's always the same.
Always the same.
But it presents
But
itself
it
as if
never
it's this and that and
but it-
different.
New.
Yeah.
It feels novel.
Yeah.
Like
Well, it's intrinsically new because it's always a surprise.
and it's always new.
Yeah, it's always absolutely new because the experiential characteristics are entirely unpredictable and entirely novel, always, because they refresh instantly and spontaneously and unpredictably. You never know exactly what you're going to be experiencing. Never. I mean, there's nothing that's not a total surprise, nothing whatsoever. You don't know what you're going to be thinking, you don't know what you're going to be seeing, you don't know what you're going to be feeling, you just don't have absolutely no idea what the experience is going to be like, and it never repeats. It's continually changing and it never repeats. I mean, how is boredom even possible?
It's
Yeah.
just like
You have to imagine it into existence.
I live here, so I walk here, and suddenly two, those who knock on the door with Bible,
Mm-hmm.
they greeted me in suit,
Uh-huh.
and they walked me to open seat.
Oh, nice.
They wrote
Yes,
in.
Troy.
And I
You only have missionaries.
and they were still trying to find out if I found Jesus.
What did you tell him?
I just said you're walking with him right now.
Oh, that's great.
I didn't say I'm Jesus, but always knew.
Don't let the secret out. Some people get all bent out of shape when you tell them.
They crucified Jesus when he tried to come.
Yeah. Look at what happened. Look at what happened to the original. Even he's not allowed to be Jesus. Right?
This time of year.
So next time I walk in with two men with I wish they were here.
What is this phenomena of attention? You talked about it flitting around,
Yeah.
widening its scope,
Yeah.
narrowing it. Is that also an energy field?
You can't say. It's part and parcel of what this seems to look like. You can't say what it is. You can't get to the bottom of it. You can't even say if it's actual. You can just say it's a seeming. It seems to be something like that. But when you try and pin it down, when you try to, reverse engineer it or try and figure out what it actually is, you don't end up with anything. You can't get to the bottom. You can't get to the bottom of anything. I mean, that's what's so slippery about this. Is it generates literally infinite seemings with infinite evidence, and yet none of it actually resolves into coherence. You can never actually find what anything is. Even as you have all this evidence, right? Unending evidence, inconceivable, a universe of evidence, and you can't put it together into anything. It never resolves. It's just these endless seemings that just, it's like trying to pick up mercury in your hand. You pick it up and it's gone. It slips through your finger. It's because it's intrinsically unresolved. It's intrinsically open, intrinsically infinite, you could say, without ending.
But it has
No edges to grab, no corners.
the pattern is dispersive though.
Yes.
In the sense that it's like a flock of birds.
Right.
So thought patterns are autonomous, but they tend to kind of hang out with each other until the whole field changes.
But only seemingly. When you look closer, you don't even that degree of coherence falls apart. I mean, thought.
If you slow down, you can get to the point where you can see a single thought arise, which is completely unrelated to everything else.
Yeah, but even a single thought isn't a single thought. It's it's like a single cloud in the sky. It's not a single cloud. Because the cloud is one with the whole sky, and you can't. It's too heavy-handed to say, oh, the cloud is a cloud and it's not the sky, because it isn't. The cloud is literally the sky. The sky looks like cloud there, and the cloud looks like sky there. And the same with thought. A thought is happening. It doesn't really have sharp edges. It doesn't really have a line where the thought ends and the non-thought, the field of mind begins. Yeah.
Well, here I begin and here I end.
So it's something. It is a presence. It's an undeniable experiential phenomena. But you can't. But again, when you look very closely, you can't resolve it. You can't pin it down. You can't get a hold of it. You can't put a border around it. And ultimately, you look at anything, you found the exact same phenomenon. You look at anything, and you end up looking at everything, which doesn't negate things being the way they are, but it just indicates that the way they are is infinitely subtle and ramified and interconnected and non-linearly profound. With all this infinite dimensionality. Which is just a lot of hogwash, which is just a way of trying to poetically indicate this astounding unresolvability. But just because you can't say it doesn't mean you can't know it very intimately. You can't get to the end of anything, but you can be with the fact that you can't get to the end of anything very precisely. So you can be with this slipperiness, you can be with this openness very precisely, and it'll show you what it is. It'll show you for a fact that it is that way, even though you won't be able to say what it is you're seeing or say what it is you understand. But you can know it. That's the amazing thing, because you are it. Because your conditions are the same as its conditions. So you intrinsically are capable of handling this open-endedness because it's your very nature. It's what you are. So you can meet it where it is because you literally are it. It's not like there's a you and an it. The strangeness of this phenomena here, the strangeness of this experiential field, is actually very intimately knowable. Mm-hmm. Even though it's completely irrational and can't be said and absurd and infinite and blah blah blah. But that's just in words. But knowing is infinitely more powerful, infinitely more intelligent than words and semantic systems. And so direct knowing, there's no limit to how profoundly and how intimately this can be known with certainty. This is not vague. What this is very precisely itself. It's very precisely what it is. It's very precisely the way it is. It's not a kind of a precision that can be put in human terms, or they can be put into words, but nonetheless it is very precisely exactly what it is. And this precision can be known. It conveys it. It displays what it is very clearly and very self-verifyingly. Just to direct observation, to direct engagement. And again, it's very paradoxical because the direct engagement is already always happening. It's just really a matter of letting yourself notice I mean, just the spontaneous presence of experience, which is already the case, is already 100% intimate, hyper-intelligent engagement. It's just a matter of, settling into that level of, because it's not a linear or logical intelligence. It's really a matter of discovering the inherent intelligence of consciousness itself, which is not an intelligence of thought or of semantics. It's an intelligence of engagement with quality, engagement with structure, engagement with experiential flavor.
Like a texture.
Yes, texture. So texture, because again, texture is not just inert. It's not just lifeless. The texture is life itself. It's intelligence itself. It's meaningfulness itself. All these patterns are an inconceivable language, a profound, amazingly profound, intelligent language. But it's not a language that you can translate into human terms. But you don't need to, because you're not a human.
So you say don't meditate, but to me this is the essence of meditation.
Well, it is the essence of meditation. When I say don't meditate, I mean don't do what people think of when they mean by meditating. Discover what meditation really is, which is what you've always been doing and never been doing anything but, which is the true meditation. Sahaja meditation, natural meditation of what experience is. The yoga of radiant presence. What radiant presence is intrinsically doing, has always been doing. What experience itself has always been doing, which is exploring itself multidimensionally and et cetera, et cetera.
It's impossible to conceptually understand what you're saying.
Absolutely. Don't try. Do yourself a favor. You'll just get dizzy.
So it's become a construction.
Yeah. This is not about concepts.
Yeah.
And it's about experience itself. The normal human stance is that we're over here and we're intelligent and we're thinking about things and we're figuring things out and analyzing things, and there's all of this stuff out here that we're figuring out and analyzing. And so it's just sort of inert. It's just sort of sitting here as a convenience for us to think about. But that's not what's actually happening. The conscious thought and the semantic thought and the logical thought is actually just an energy system, and all of this other stuff that is seemingly just happening, this stuff, is actually the same energy system. And it is pure intelligence. But it's not an intelligence that translates to logical intelligence or to semantic intelligence. You can't talk about it. But since it is intelligence, it's not just inert. It knows itself. It's profound. It's meaningful. And it recognizes itself too. In its presence, its profundity communicates itself. When you discover being with it as it is, you discover the wow factor. Get outside your normal, frame of reference orientation. Normal self-image and world view and so on and so forth.
Peter, from your retreat in September, and describing what radiant presence is, it never departs from itself, is unique and integral, complete and undivided. So, the ordinary, any state of what you call affliction or seeking or just ordinary mind that is looking for something other than the present.
Right.
Like now, things are okay, but in the future, you fill in the blank with it.
Right.
It's basically a linear orientation, a sense of looking ahead.
Right. All that, yeah.
Where the dawning to one's mind of the nature of what this really is non-linear. It's not going anywhere. It's not,
yeah, exactly
no great pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
And that reveals the invalidity and the imaginary nature of all of this holding it in linear terms and holding it as something you can seek or something you can build for later and all of that. Because when you notice what this actually is, you discover that the nature of what this is, none of those considerations could possibly apply. It couldn't be like that because it isn't. You know, I mean, normal human logic, normal human worldview is instantly invalidated, or let's say superseded, by, direct noticing of the nature of this condition, of what the experiential field actually is. Mm-hmm. It's like you could say it's maybe analogous to Newtonian physics and quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics didn't stop Newtonian physics from working. The apple still falls to the ground, but it's not an apple and it's not ground. It's quantum fields of probability. But it still looks like an apple falling to the ground. It's just a Newtonian way of describing it is heavy-handed and much more inaccurate. And likewise, the sort of the normal human framework or human worldview way of describing it is equally heavy-handed and inaccurate. So, yeah, I am thinking, and I'm thinking about what I might be doing, and I'm planning, and then time seems to pass, and things seem to happen, and maybe I kind of semi-achieve what I'm planning to do. So that kind of way of looking at it is not wholly implausible until you see what this actually is, and then you discover that even though it can look like that, what it actually is radically other than that.
Yeah, it's not even, one sense of reality, what I call the ordinary, is it's functioning along very understandable patterns.
Right.
The actual present, it's not, I think you can say, they're infinitely patterned and infinitely differentiated as experiential characteristics. There's no, the more radiant presence is known, the less fixation on any.
Yeah, exactly, because you discover there is actually not sufficient stability to fixate on. When you discover that this is an infinite field of absolute incoherence, where are you going to hang your logic? Where are you going to hang your analysis? Where are you going to hang your defining this is this and that's that?
The ordinary tendency is to grasp at something.
Yeah.
Try and make sense.
Yeah, but that whole mode is based on one simple mechanism, which is denial of the actuality that there is nothing graspable that it can be found to exist. Because everything, all experiential patternings are absolutely unstable and also absolutely infinite. So you can't ever find out exactly what anything is, and it's already something different in the next instant. So between those two, just those two obvious facts, how can you work? How can you grab something? How can you hold something? How can you define something? And yet that whole mode of logic is based on the premise that you can. That I know what this is. There's a cup and it's just a cup. It's just a boring little cup, right? It's not. It actually isn't. Experientially, the experience. This is not a cup. It's an experience. An experience is slippery and multidimensional and bizarre. But if I ignore that it's experience and say that it's a cup, which is exactly what humans do in their imagination, we create this worldview of all these fixed inert objects that are sitting around, and we're active and we are interacting with them, and they just sit there and basically stay where we put them and until we come and get them. Where as opposed to the actuality, which is experience itself, is absolutely dynamic, slippery, fleeting phenomena that never repeats itself, and instantaneously is already different. It's absolutely mercurial.
How much of it, they say human being has certain perceptions, an animal, other perceptions, and so on.
Yeah.
God being.
Yeah, sure. The 6 realms and all.
Well, that's fine. But you understood it's 6 different ways of seeing different perception of something like that.
Yeah. But these are all. But again, this is again a kind of a. It's more. It's not that there's literally 6 necessarily, so much as indicating that. There's no limit to the erroneous worldviews or the heavy-handed misinterpretations that this can be seen in terms of. But it can also be seen as itself outside of interpretation, which is what realization consists of.
Yeah, seeing it as it actually is, which is as you describe it, is really differentiated.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
forth. Again, those words are just pointers.
Yeah, exactly so.
This was great. Gus, I was reading it to him the other day, and I photocopied it this morning. This right here, there's a lot of stuff written, but this really cuts to the chase.
Good.
Well, the experience is uninterpretable, which is clear it is. This is really bad news for psychoanalysis.
Well, yes and no.
Oh, good, I'm glad.
Because
Yeah.
because psychoanalysis may pretend to be about rationality, but it isn't actually. It's about a fundamental irrational direct engagement between an individual and a therapist, and that engagement, even though it may pretend to have rational elements and verbal elements and all that, there's a whole lot else going on as well.
All of which is uninterpretable.
Of course, all of it, and even the semantic portion is uninterpretable, because logic is not actually logical. Logic is an expression of this same irrationality as everything else, and so even though logic pretends to be logic, it's not actually. So there's no limits to what spontaneous engagement of energy can accomplish. So any kind of functionality can be effective, regardless of the fact that it's theoretically bankrupt. Screw theory, right? It's all about practice.
So simply the mysterious, uninterpretable interplay between 2 apparent people has its own magic.
Of course it does. If we all know, I mean, this is what our life consists of. I mean, all of this astounding eventfulness that occurs in our interplay with other beings and other objects and phenomena and circumstances, this amazing dance is what the unfoldment of our life looks like, consists of. And it's all meaningful, it's all juicy, it's all something, but you can't ever say what it is. It's just that our attempts at logical description are pathetically inadequate. But that doesn't invalidate the thing itself.
So when you use the word meaningful there, it's simply a pointer to this uninterpretable energy.
Yes. I'm talking about the true meaning, not human meaning. The true meaning and the true purpose is completely inexpressible and inconceivable in human terms. But that doesn't mean that there's no meaning and no purpose. It just means that the actual meaning and the actual purpose is infinite and multidimensional and transcendental and wow. And again, just because these things are undefinable and transcendental and irrational doesn't mean that they can't be engaged with most intimately and can't be known and integrated with most intimately. Because you are not limited to rational modes. You're not limited to logical modes. That's not what you are. You are irrational. You are infinite. You are divine. So all these kinds of miraculous engagement and functioning are not beyond you. They are your very nature. So it's really just a matter of noticing that that is the case and has always been the case, and it's always been happening. It's always been being exercised, and then you get to sort of enjoy it and participate in it a little more deliberately. It doesn't actually change anything, but the difference in perspective can be quite let's just say big.
Refreshing.
Yeah. Well, it's quitting time as it happens. Thank you all so much for coming. A pleasure to be with you tonight, and I'll be here in 2 weeks. And have a lovely whatever you have, I hope.
Thank you.